Welcome to Bedtime Science. Did you know that the way you prefer to receive affection may have less to do with a personality type and more to do with a nervous system you inherited before you could speak? Tonight, we look at the quiet science behind how human beings express and interpret love, from a best-selling book that shaped a generation of relationships to the neurobiology that may explain what is really happening beneath the surface. In the next moments, we will gently discuss how a Baptist pastor's counseling notes became one of the most popular relationship frameworks in modern history. What happens inside the brain when we feel loved, including the autonomic nervous system, dopamine, and the empathy circuits of the prefrontal cortex and insula. What a 2024 scientific review found when researchers tested whether love languages hold up under careful measurement, and why attachment styles formed in early childhood may matter more than any quiz result, and why that is actually hopeful. Before we begin, if you find comfort here tonight, consider subscribing to join our quiet community. And if you are still awake, you can leave a soft comment about what topic we should explore next. Now let us begin. In 1992, a Southern Baptist pastor named Gary Chapman published a small book. It wasn't born in a laboratory. It didn't come out of a university research program or a controlled clinical trial with hundreds of subjects. It came from something much quieter than that. Chapman had spent years, possibly decades, sitting across from married couples in a counseling room listening. The same kinds of complaints surfaced again and again. One spouse would say something like, "I do everything around this house and it's never enough." Another would murmur, "All I want is for you to sit with me. Just sit with me. That's all." He read back through his notes. Patterns appeared. People didn't just want to be loved. They wanted to be loved in a specific way. And when that specific way wasn't met, they felt invisible, even when their partner was genuinely trying to show care. From those patterns, Chapman drew 5 categories. Words of affirmation, the spoken or written expression of care. A simple "I appreciate you." A handwritten note left on the kitchen counter before work. Praise that's direct and honest. Acts of service. Doing something concrete for another person that lightens their load. Cooking dinner when your partner is exhausted. Picking up prescriptions. Folding laundry without being asked. Receiving gifts. Not materialism, not extravagance, but the symbolic weight of a chosen object. A book you thought they'd enjoy. A flower picked on an afternoon walk. The quiet act of thinking about someone when they aren't in the room and then making that thought visible. Quality time. Undivided attention. Not sitting beside someone while scrolling through your phone, but actually looking at them, listening, being fully present in the same room at the same moment. And physical touch. A hand resting on the shoulder, a long embrace at the end of a difficult day, sitting close enough that your arms brush. Chapman believed each person had one primary love language, one channel through which affection registered most deeply. And he believed that when partners spoke different languages, the result was a kind of emotional static. Both people trying, neither one feeling heard. The idea was intuitive, it felt true, and it spread. Over 20 million copies of the 5 love languages have been sold worldwide. The book has been translated into 50 languages. More than 30 million people have taken the love language quiz, a short forced choice assessment where you pick between paired statements like, "We hold hands" versus, "My loved one gives me a gift." The framework became a fixture of couples retreats, relationship advice columns, self-help podcasts, and late-night conversations between partners trying to understand why love sometimes felt so hard. In Australia, a government program worth $20 million was built around the love languages concept. For a generation of people searching for answers, Chapman's framework offered a clean one. You and your partner simply speak different languages. Learn theirs. Connection follows. There's a real reason it caught on so widely. We all recognize the feeling of offering something, a gesture or a gift or an entire afternoon of our time, and watching it land flat. We know what it's like to want something we can't quite name. Chapman gave that nameless ache a vocabulary. But here's the thing. Chapman holds no degrees in psychiatry, psychology, or therapy. His observations were drawn from a very specific population: married, heterosexual Christian couples seeking pastoral counseling, most likely in American church communities. There was no published sample size, no demographic breakdown, no control groups, no standardized measurement instruments. This wasn't a controlled study. It was pastoral intuition, organized into categories. And for a long time, nobody seemed to mind. The couples who sat in Chapman's office almost certainly shared certain characteristics: traditional values, a faith community, a heterosexual marriage. Chapman himself has publicly stated that pairings outside of a man and a woman fall outside what he considers God's primary design. That's not a criticism of his beliefs, but it matters. It matters a lot when you're building a framework that claims to describe how all human beings give and receive love. A homogeneous sample produces homogeneous patterns, and the patterns Chapman identified may tell us more about one particular slice of American relationship culture than about the universal human experience of affection. When researchers later used what's called a bottom-up approach, asking people to describe in their own words what they actually do to maintain satisfying relationships, they identified 7 distinct maintenance behaviors. Some of those had no equivalent in Chapman's 5 categories. Supporting a partner's autonomy, for example. Helping someone pursue personal goals that have nothing to do with the relationship. Developing real strategies for working through conflict without retreating or blowing up. These are genuine forms of love, and Chapman's system doesn't capture them at all. A 2026 analysis from the University of Edinburgh went even further. It argued that the love languages framework can obscure gendered emotional labor by reframing the unequal distribution of care as a mutual communication issue. Instead of asking who is doing the relational work, the framework asks whether that work is being expressed in the right way. The question shifts, and the imbalance remains hidden beneath a pleasant vocabulary. Chapman's own quiz, the Love Language Personal Profile, uses a forced choice format: 30 items. Each one presents 2 statements, and you pick whichever feels more meaningful to you. This structure has a built-in problem. It's zero-sum. If you pick quality time over physical touch, the quiz records that as a preference, even if you care about both equally. The format simply won't let you say, "I value all of these." Researchers noticed this early on. When they designed their own instruments, Likert-type scales where people could rate each love language independently from 1 to 5, the results looked very different from what the quiz produced. People didn't cluster around a single primary language. They rated all 5 as important. The average rating for each love language hovered around 4 out of 5. distributions were heavily skewed toward the top of the scale. Study after study showed the same basic picture. People don't have one channel for receiving affection. They have many. And the forced choice quiz didn't reliably match the continuous ratings. Consider this. In one study by Polk and Egbert, the forced choice quiz categorized most participants as preferring quality time or physical touch. But on the continuous rating scale, gifts scored highest. The percentage of people identified as having gifts as their primary language ranged from 0 to 4% on the quiz, but jumped to over 50% on the rating scale. The instrument itself was shaping the answer. In 2024, Emily Impett of the University of Toronto, along with Hee-Young Gideon Park and Amy Muoz of York University, published a careful review in Current Directions in Psychological Science. They examined all the available empirical research and tested Chapman's 3 central claims, one by one. The first claim: each person has a single primary love language. The data didn't back it up. People endorsed all 5 languages as meaningful. The correlations between how people rated each love language were high, ranging from R equals 0.54 to R equals 0.75. In plain terms, if you valued one, you tended to value the others too. No clear separation between types. A 2024 study by Flicker and Sancier Barbosa surveyed 696 participants, with a mean age of 43.8 years, and 70% were married. Over half had no identifiable primary love language at all. And the people who did identify a primary language, they were actually less satisfied than those who didn't. That's worth sitting with for a moment. The people who fit Chapman's framework most neatly were the ones doing worse. The second claim: there are exactly 5 love languages. Factor analysis, the statistical method used to test whether a group of items actually clusters into distinct categories, failed to consistently find Chapman's 5-factor structure. Different studies found different numbers. One found 3 factors, one found 4, one found 5, but those 5 didn't match Chapman's original proposal. A 2022 empirical test uncovered evidence for a 6th love language not captured in the typology at all. And the correlations between the 5 categories were so high. Again, 0.54 to 0.75. That researchers began asking whether these were truly separate things, or just overlapping expressions of the same underlying need. Here's what that means when you strip away the statistics. If someone who values words of affirmation also tends to value quality time and physical touch and acts of service and gifts, then these aren't different languages. They're more like different notes in the same chord, different angles on the same human longing. The third claim: matching your partner's love language leads to greater relationship satisfaction. This one received the most rigorous testing. Chapman and colleagues in 2023 used analytical methods to test all possible combinations of one person's preferences against their partner's expressions. The result was straightforward. Expressions of all love languages were positively linked to relationship satisfaction, all of them, regardless of a person's stated preference. The matching effect, the heart of Chapman's entire framework, barely showed up at all. A follow-up study in 2025 looked at 954 couples with a mean age of 55.42 and an average relationship length of 27.39 years. The researchers used different scores, response surface analysis, and machine learning methods, testing matching across every possible love language pairing. Across every approach, virtually no evidence emerged that matching on love languages explained any additional variation in relationship outcomes beyond individual personality traits and attachment orientations. And in the Flicker and Sancier-Barbosa study, satisfaction with a partner's behavior in your primary love language predicted relationship quality, no better than satisfaction with your lower-ranked languages. So what did predict satisfaction? Overall warmth across many loving behaviors, all of them working together. Words of affirmation and quality time turned out to be universally stronger predictors of perceived love and relationship satisfaction, regardless of what anyone's stated primary language was. Not because those are the right languages, but because verbal reassurance and genuine presence appear to be foundational human needs that cut across any typology. Impet and her colleagues proposed replacing the language metaphor entirely. They suggested a nutritional one instead. Love, they argued, is not a language one needs to learn to speak. It's more like a balanced diet. People need a full range of essential nutrients to sustain lasting love, not a single vitamin swallowed in massive doses. What matters is not figuring out which single nutrient a person craves. What matters is offering a rich, varied, responsive set of affectionate behaviors. This is a more generous view, and it fits the data far better. The heart, it seems, doesn't speak one language. It listens for many kinds of warmth at once, like a garden that needs both sunlight and rain and decent soil and time, not just one or the other. A simple idea, written in a pastor's notebook, carried across millions of kitchen tables and quiet conversations late at night. It helped people name what they wanted. That's a real contribution. But the science beneath the surface tells a more complicated, more beautiful story. But beneath these categories, beneath the quizzes and the retreats and the 20 million copies, something deeper is happening inside the body. A process that begins long before anyone learns any language at all. Your nervous system has two broad settings. One speeds things up, one slows them down. The sympathetic branch is the accelerator. It raises your heart rate, sharpens your focus, floods your muscles with blood. It's what fires when you hear a sudden noise or step off a curb too quickly. The parasympathetic branch is the brake. It lowers the heart rate, relaxes the gut, deepens the breath. It's what comes forward when you sit in a warm room with someone you trust, and you feel your shoulders drop half an inch without deciding to let them. These two branches form a kind of internal seesaw. That constant, automatic, unconscious balancing act between alertness and calm is the foundation of how you connect with other people. This isn't a metaphor, it's measurable. The autonomic nervous systems of children tend to mimic the autonomic nervous systems of the primary caregiver. This is one of the earliest dynamics in human life. Before speech, before memory, before a child has any concept of what a relationship even is. The baby's nervous system watches the parents, not with eyes, with the body, with heart rate and breathing and the tension or looseness of muscle. If the parent system is calm, the child settles. If the parent system is activated, anxious, reactive, flooded, the child's follows the same path. This is co-regulation, and it isn't optional, it's a biological requirement. When two people who feel close to each other sit together, their nervous systems begin to move in tandem. Heart rates drift into alignment. Breathing patterns start to match. Skin conductance shifts at similar moments. A study of 27 couples found confirmed cardiac synchrony during structured interactions. Partners showed in-phase synchrony of heart rate and antiphase synchrony of heart rate variability, a pattern that reached statistical significance compared to shuffled control data. Two separate bodies, two separate hearts, beating in quiet coordination without either person choosing it. Research by Goldstein and colleagues showed that a partner's touch increased respiratory coupling in both pain and no-pain conditions, and increased heart rate coupling during pain specifically. When the partner's touch was absent, that coupling weakened. Pain registered more strongly. The nervous system was on its own. This is physiology, not personality theory. The body expects another trusted body nearby, and when it gets one, it recalibrates. A 2024 EEG study with 110 participants tested what happens to brain-to-brain connectivity when people touch. Romantic lovers showed increased dynamic interpersonal functional connectivity during touch. Strangers showed the opposite. Their connectivity actually decreased. The pattern in romantic couples followed two phases. First, an initial adaptation period as the two brains oriented to each other. Then a steady climb toward peak synchrony. Stranger pairs showed the reverse curve. Connectivity declined over time. The brains drifted apart. Touch between lovers pulled the two nervous systems closer together. Touch between strangers pushed them further apart. And in a separate study by Pan and colleagues, touch-induced neural synchronization appeared specifically in mentalizing and sensory motor systems between romantic partners, but not between friends. The strength of the synchronization correlated with self-reported romantic love, and the empathic capacity of the male partner positively modulated the association, meaning the more attuned the partner, the stronger the neural bonding effect of touch. You don't just feel someone's hand on your arm. Your brain synchronizes with their brain through that contact, but only if the bond between you is real. A 2025 study using hyperscanning EEG went even further. It showed that increased interbrain synchrony between romantic couples was specifically tied to empathy for pain. The two nervous systems were not merely co-present, they were co-experiencing. One person's pain echoed faintly and partially in the other person's brain, not as a thought, as a pattern of neural activity. Deep inside the brain sits a small region called the anterior insula. It occupies a kind of crossroads between the body and the mind, between the self and the other. The anterior insula is the primary region responsible for interoception. That's the awareness of your own internal bodily states, your heartbeat, your breathing rhythm, that subtle feeling in your gut when something is off but you can't explain why. But the insula does something unusual. It uses the same neural machinery to process your own internal states and the perceived emotional states of another person. The very same circuits, the same tissue. When you monitor your own heartbeat, and when you watch another person in pain, the same region of the anterior insula activates. This isn't coincidence, it's architecture. The insula serves as a relay station, transmitting information from premotor mirror areas, the regions that fire both when you do something and when you watch someone else do it, to limbic areas that process emotional content. The insula is essentially splitting one's attention between how we feel ourselves and the thinking and the bodily sensations of the other. That's a close paraphrase of how neuroscientist Andrew Huberman describes it. It's how you feel what someone else feels, not by thinking about it. By running the same internal simulation your body would run if the experience were your own. A 2012 functional MRI study demonstrated that when participants first attended to their own bodily states, simply paying attention to their heartbeat for a few minutes, neural activity during a subsequent empathy task in the bilateral anterior insula went up noticeably. The boost was specific to interoceptive awareness, not to paying attention to external things. The pathway from body sensing to other sensing runs through the same cortical territory. You feel yourself first, and from that same place, you feel another. The anterior insula also distinguishes between love and desire. A University of Chicago study examined a stroke patient with damage to the anterior insula. That damage impaired the capacity for deep, lasting affection, while leaving the experience of desire relatively untouched. The anterior insula handles the more abstract representations involved in love. The posterior insula handles the more concrete sensory experiences of wanting. They live in the same structure. They share walls, so to speak, but they are separate processes running on separate circuitry, and they can exist independently of each other. You can want someone deeply without loving them. You can love someone without wanting them in a given moment. The brain keeps these experiences distinct, even when life makes them feel inseparable. Now consider the prefrontal cortex. This is the front portion of the brain sitting just behind your forehead. It plays a role that complements what the insula does. While the insula generates the felt experience of another person's emotional state, the prefrontal cortex provides the cognitive framework around it. Perspective taking, mentalizing, the capacity to know where you end and someone else begins. Two overlapping empathy systems exist in the brain. Affective empathy, which means feeling what another person feels, lives primarily in the anterior insula and the anterior midcingulate cortex. This is embodied simulation. Your body runs a copy of what the other body is experiencing. Cognitive empathy, which means understanding what another person feels, lives in the dorsomedial prefrontal gyrus, the temporoparietal junction, and the supramarginal gyrus. This is perspective taking. Your mind builds a model of what the other mind is going through. Both of these systems converge in the anterior insula. That's where the cognitive and emotional threads of empathy share common neural networks. And there's another player worth noting, the right supramarginal gyrus. It works in tension with the insula, checking whether what you're feeling is genuine emotional resonance or just a surface-level reaction to something dramatic. Think of it as a quality control system for empathy. It asks, are you really sharing this person's experience, or are you just reacting to how loud or vivid the situation is? That distinction matters because empathy isn't only noticing, it's accurately sharing. In the context of romantic love, the prefrontal cortex does double duty. There's a pathway connecting the prefrontal cortex to the nucleus accumbens, a small structure deep in the brain tied to reward and motivation. This pathway carries positive emotions. A second pathway runs from the nucleus accumbens to the amygdala. This one carries the negative ones: fear, social evaluation, threat detection. When you're in love, the first pathway activates. The second one goes quiet. This is part of why early romantic love feels the way it does. Prefrontal cortex activity actually decreases during passionate infatuation. The part of the brain responsible for judgment, impulse control, and careful reasoning steps back. The world narrows. The other person fills it. As passionate love settles into stable, long-term attachment, prefrontal regulation returns. You begin to see the other person more clearly. You can hold both deep affection and honest realism in the same breath. The brain doesn't stop loving. It just loves with more nuance. Now, dopamine. Most people have heard of this molecule, but what most people have heard is slightly inaccurate. Dopamine is not a reward chemical, not exactly. It is mainly a molecule of motivation, craving, and pursuit. Huberman describes it that way, and the description fits the neurochemistry well. Dopamine drives the desire component of love, the pull towards someone, the wanting, the way your attention bends toward a person the way a plant bends toward light. The dopamine system lives in the ventral tegmental area, a small region in the midbrain that sends projections to the nucleus accumbens and the medial prefrontal cortex. A meta-analysis of human neuroimaging studies found that the ventral tegmental area is the primary convergence point for both maternal and passionate love. The same structure activates when a mother gazes at her infant and when a person gazes at someone they're falling for. This isn't a quirk of brain anatomy. It's evolution repurposing old circuitry. The neurobiological mechanism that bonds parent to child is the same one that bonds lover to partner. The hardware was built once, then reused. The molecular detail here is worth lingering on. It's quietly remarkable. Most of what we know about the dopamine-oxytocin architecture of pair bonding comes from research on prairie voles. These are small rodents, roughly the size of a tennis ball, that form lifelong pair bonds. They're among the very few mammals that do. Here's what happens when two prairie voles bond. Mating stimulates neurons in the ventral tegmental area to release dopamine into the nucleus accumbens and the medial prefrontal cortex. At the same time, the paraventricular nucleus releases oxytocin into the nucleus accumbens. Two chemicals arriving at the same location at the same moment. Oxytocin released into the ventral tegmental area further boosts dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens. So oxytocin doesn't just do its own work. It amplifies the dopamine signal, turns up the volume. But here's the part that matters most. Pair bond formation requires simultaneous activation of both oxytocin receptors and D2 dopamine receptors in the nucleus accumbens shell. These two receptor types physically bind together, forming what's called a heterodimer. And when oxytocin binds to its receptor at the same moment dopamine binds to the D2 receptor, dopamine's affinity for that receptor increases. What does that mean in everyday terms? It means that in the presence of oxytocin, the molecule released during closeness, trust, and physical touch, the dopamine signal hits harder. The reward grows stronger. The other person's presence becomes literally more rewarding at the level of individual cells. This is not a metaphor. This is molecular machinery. Your body has a built-in mechanism for making a specific person feel like home. After the bond forms, a second dopamine receptor type, D1, gets upregulated in the nucleus accumbens. This receptor drives a different behavior, aggression toward potential rivals. the neurochemical basis of mate guarding. And there's something else. Serotonin levels drop during early romantic love, plunging to levels that resemble those seen in obsessive-compulsive disorder. The molecule that normally provides a sense of calm and satiation decreases, and the mind becomes preoccupied, looping, unable to stop thinking about the other person. Stephanie Cassiapo's research at the University of Chicago identified 12 distinct brain areas that coordinate during romantic love, releasing dopamine, oxytocin, and adrenaline in concert. The result is a euphoric sense of purpose. Different brain areas being active in different sequences and with different intensities can make us feel as if we are in the mode that we call desire, or in the mode of love, or in the mode of attachment. That's a direct quote from Huberman. Not one system, not one chemical, a chord. Many notes sounding together, shifting from moment to moment. No single region controls love. Instead, the brain plays a quiet chord, many notes at once, and from that chord, the feeling of closeness slowly emerges. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory offers a useful framework for how the autonomic nervous system mediates social bonding. The theory identifies three hierarchical neural circuits. The ventral vagal complex. This is the social engagement system. When the nervous system detects safety, this circuit supports connection, trust, and co-regulation. Your face relaxes. Your voice drops to a warmer, lower register. Your head tilts slightly. These are signals of safety, broadcast and received beneath conscious awareness. The sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight-or-flight branch, hypervigilance, emotional reactivity, anxiety. The heart pounds, the mind scans for danger. Every text message gets analyzed for hidden meaning. The dorsal vagal complex. This is the shutdown branch. Withdrawal, numbness, going flat and quiet inside. The body's oldest defense, shared with reptiles. When escape isn't possible, go still. Coagulation, the reciprocal sending and receiving of safety signals between nervous systems, is not a luxury. It's a biological need. It's the mechanism by which a baby looks to a parent, is reassured through an embrace, and gradually develops the autonomic flexibility to navigate future relationships. Without that connection, the nervous system can remain stuck in defensive states, scanning, bracing, shutting down, not because something is wrong with the person, but because the system never received the signals it needed to learn that closeness could be safe. With this understanding of the brain's machinery, researchers eventually turned a careful lens on Chapman's framework. What they found shifts the whole picture. What Chapman observed in those counseling sessions, the patterns of complaint, the longing for specific forms of attention, may not reflect personality types at all. They may reflect nervous system states. The person who craves words of affirmation may not have a love language. They may have an anxious attachment system that requires constant verbal reassurance to feel settled. The person who prefers physical touch over conversation may not have a different personality profile. They may have a nervous system that co-regulates most efficiently through the body, through warmth and pressure and proximity, rather than through words. The person who needs quality time, undivided presence, may be operating from a system that detects safety primarily through sustained attentional signals. Your eyes on them, your phone put away. The message, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, you have my full attention. The categories Chapman drew were real observations, but the mechanism underneath was deeper than he realized. These aren't languages, they're adaptations, nervous system strategies for seeking safety, shaped long before anyone could articulate what they wanted. If love languages aren't the fixed categories they appear to be, then what actually shapes how we give and receive affection? The answer may reach further back than any quiz. It may reach all the way to the first years of your life. In the 1970s and 1980s, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth designed an experiment called the strange situation. It was deceptively simple. A child, usually between 12 and 18 months old, is placed in a room with their caregiver. A stranger enters. The caregiver leaves the room. The stranger stays. Then the caregiver comes back. What Ainsworth watched most carefully was not the separation itself. It was the reunion. How did the child respond when the caregiver returned? Four patterns emerged from those reunion moments. The securely attached child explored the room with confidence while the caregiver was present. When the caregiver left, the child showed distress, sometimes crying, sometimes going to the door. But when the caregiver returned, the child moved toward them, was comforted within a reasonable time, and went back to playing. This child had learned something fundamental. The world is safe to explore because the person I depend on comes back. The anxious, ambivalent child showed distress even before the separation happened, clingy, hypervigilant, watching the caregiver closely. When the caregiver left, the child became deeply upset. But when the caregiver returned, the child was hard to soothe, reaching for the caregiver and then pushing away, crying, then rejecting comfort. The system was flooded. The signal was too loud to quiet. This child had absorbed a different lesson. The person I depend on is unpredictable. I need to stay close and keep monitoring. The anxious, avoidant child showed little visible distress when the caregiver left, played quietly, seemed indifferent. But physiological measurements painted a different picture. Heart rate was elevated, cortisol was high, the body was stressed, the behavior was calm. This child had learned to suppress the need, to hide the signal, because reaching out had not reliably been met with warmth. And the disorganized child showed no coherent strategy at all, approaching the caregiver and freezing mid-step, looking away while reaching forward, contradictory movements in rapid succession. This pattern showed up most often when the caregiver was themselves frightened or frightening. The source of safety was also the source of threat, and the nervous system, caught between two incompatible drives, collapsed into confusion. These childhood attachment patterns are strongly predictive of attachment style in romantic partnerships later in life. The neural circuits for child-caregiver attachment get repurposed for romantic attachment. The same vagal system, the same oxytocin pathways, the same dopamine architecture. The hardware that learned its first lessons about safety and closeness in the arms of a caregiver is the very same hardware that activates when you fall in love at 25 or 40 or 60. A landmark study by Keely Dugan, R. Chris Fraley, and their colleagues, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2025, tracked 1,364 children and their families across 3 full decades, from infancy to ages 26 through 31. Of those original participants, 705 completed a follow-up between 2018 and 2022. What did they find? Maternal relationships predicted attachment security across all adult relationship types: romantic partners, friends, and parents. People who felt closer to their mothers and experienced less conflict in childhood tended to feel more secure in all their relationships during adulthood. But a second finding was even more striking. Early childhood friendships were a stronger predictor than maternal relationships for the quality of adult romantic relationships and friendships. Children who enjoyed increasingly close and deepening friendships across their early years showed meaningful gains in relational security by age 30. The mother matters, but so does the world beyond the mother. Look, there's a small to moderate association between anxious attachment and a preference for reassurance-heavy expressions of love, particularly words of affirmation and quality time, with likely correlations around R equals 0.2 to 0.3. The data on this is still sparse, but the pattern makes sense through the lens of the nervous system. The anxious system is scanning for proof. Is my partner still here? Are they paying attention to me? Do they see me? Verbal affirmation says, I see you, I'm here, I'm not leaving. Quality time says, you have my undivided attention, my nervous system is oriented toward yours. Anxiously attached individuals also tend to prefer partners who express more distress during stressful moments, consistent with a desire for emotional validation. If my system is activated, I need yours to match. I need evidence that you feel it too. Avoidant individuals show a different profile. They prefer partners to express less emotional intensity, less hope during stressful moments, less excitement during positive ones. The avoidant system is deactivating. It reduces incoming emotional input to maintain a feeling of control. Physical touch and quality time may appeal to avoidant individuals because these forms of closeness don't require much verbal emotional expression. Presence without words. The fearful avoidant pattern, high in both anxiety and avoidance, is the most tangled of all. These individuals preferred partners to feel and express more negative emotions during stress and less positive emotions during good times. The partner and the relationship serve simultaneously as the source of longing and the source of threat. The nervous system is caught, wanting and fearing the same thing. And securely attached individuals, they tend to be comfortable with verbal communication, trust, emotional availability. They can flexibly give and receive love in many forms. Some research suggests a mild preference for words of affirmation and acts of service, but the defining feature is flexibility itself. The securely attached person isn't locked into one mode. They can respond to what's needed in the moment. These patterns suggest that what Chapman called love languages may, in part, reflect underlying attachment strategies. The nervous system's learned approach to seeking safety, not a fixed personality trait, a survival adaptation formed early, running quietly beneath every relationship you've ever had. But here is the part that matters most. And honestly, it's the part I'd want someone to hear if they were drifting off right now. These patterns are not permanent. The attachment templates you carry from childhood are real. They were written into the nervous system during the first months and years of life, through thousands of small interactions, being held or not held, soothed or not soothed, met with warmth or met with blankness. But they are not carved in stone. One of the more powerful ways to shift those templates over time is purely by the knowledge that they exist, and the understanding that those templates are malleable. That's a direct quote from Andrew Huberman, and it sounds almost too simple. But there is something about naming a pattern, seeing it from outside, recognizing that your craving for constant reassurance isn't a flaw but a strategy your nervous system learned when you were 2 years old, before you had words for anything. Something loosens, not all at once, not completely, but the grip relaxes. Dr. Alok Kanogia adds that understanding internal self-concepts and building intrinsic motivation can help rewire the nervous system for healthier connection. The work isn't only relational, it's also internal. We can adjust our own autonomic nervous system even in the absence of another person. Huberman makes this point explicitly. The work of becoming more securely attached can happen within yourself, through awareness, through practice, through the slow and patient retraining of a system that learned its first lessons before you could speak. The Dugan study, the one tracking 1,364 children for 30 years, confirmed what clinicians have long seen. Attachment styles can change, sometimes through major life events, sometimes through one good friendship that gradually teaches the nervous system something new, and sometimes simply by understanding that the pattern exists. The patterns we carry from childhood are not permanent inscriptions. They are more like paths worn into soft ground. Real, yes. Visible, easy to follow, but not the only way through. Now let's bring all of this together, quietly, without hurry. Love is not a language you speak. It is a nervous system learning to feel safe in the presence of another. Every act of affection, every word spoken softly, every hand placed on a shoulder, every gift chosen with care, every afternoon of undivided attention is an attempt by one autonomic nervous system to say to another, "You are safe here." The empathy circuits in the insula and prefrontal cortex are literally splitting attention between your own body and someone else's, feeling what they feel through the very same interoceptive machinery that monitors your own heartbeat. When that matching happens, when physiological synchrony rises and brain-to-brain connectivity strengthens, two separate nervous systems briefly become one shared rhythm. This is what Chapman observed in his counseling notes, even if the categories he drew were too neat. Beneath the 5 languages sits one deeper truth. The body already knows how to love. It learned in the first months of life, and it has been practicing ever since. Every time you reach for someone's hand, every time you listen without jumping in to fix, every time you sit in the same room with someone and the silence is comfortable rather than tense, your nervous system is running its oldest program, the one it picked up before language, before memory, before you had any idea what a relationship was. Reach out, check for safety, synchronize, settle. We began tonight with a best-selling book and its 5 simple categories. We moved beneath the surface to the autonomic nervous system, the empathy circuits, and the dopamine pathways that give rise to the feeling of love. We saw that science doesn't support the idea of a single love language, but it supports something more generous, that human beings are capable of receiving and giving love in many forms at once. And we learned that the patterns of attachment we carry from childhood, while powerful, are not fixed. They can shift, sometimes through careful therapeutic work, sometimes through a lasting friendship that teaches your nervous system new expectations, and sometimes, perhaps most quietly of all, simply by understanding that the pattern exists. The dopamine-oxytocin system doesn't just reward closeness. It rewires the brain for a specific person. The molecular mechanism by which oxytocin increases dopamine's affinity for its receptor, when both are bound at the same time, is not a poetic image. It's a literal increase in how rewarding another person's presence becomes, at the level of individual neurons. The balanced diet metaphor captures the reality better than the language metaphor ever could. Your relationship doesn't need you to master one dialect and speak it fluently. It needs you to show up in many small ways, across many ordinary moments, and offer warmth in whatever form feels right for that particular instant. A kind word, a touch, an afternoon with no agenda, a meal cooked without anyone asking, a small token that says, "I was thinking of you when you weren't in the room." Not separate languages, different expressions of the same thing, one nervous system reaching toward another saying, "You are safe here." Tonight, as your own nervous system settles into rest, it continues the quiet work it has always done, regulating, repairing, preparing you for connection once more. The sympathetic activation of the day is receding. The parasympathetic branch is coming forward, the brake, not the accelerator. Heart rate lowering, breath deepening, the muscles releasing their accumulated tension from the day. Somewhere in the brainstem, the ventral vagal system is doing what it does best, settling the body, quieting the mind, preparing the organism for that deep, restorative state where the brain consolidates memory, processes emotion, and rebuilds cellular structures that were worn down during waking hours. The dopamine system is going quiet. The circuits of desire and pursuit are dimming, not gone, just resting. They'll be there when you wake, ready to orient you toward the people and purposes that matter. The oxytocin pathways are settling into their nighttime rhythm. The molecules that amplify the rewarding quality of human presence are still circulating, slowly, softly, maintaining the bonds that were strengthened during the day. The patterns of attachment you carry, whether they lean towards security or anxiety or avoidance, aren't going anywhere tonight. But they're not rigid either. They're being processed, reorganized. The brain during rest does something notable. It replays the social interactions of the day, running them through the same empathy circuits that were active in the original moment. Smoothing, adjusting, recalibrating. You are, right now, in the process of becoming slightly, imperceptibly different from who you were this morning. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way you'll notice when you open your eyes, but the nervous system never stops learning. It never stops refining its model of what safety looks like, what closeness feels like, what love is. Every kind interaction you had today left a trace. Every moment of genuine connection strengthened a neural pathway. Every time someone met your gaze and you felt, even briefly, the warmth of being known, the architecture of your brain shifted slightly toward a greater capacity for trust. This is the slow work of a lifetime, not a quiz result, not a label, not one single language, a gradual, cumulative, lifelong process of learning to feel safe in the presence of another. The brain quiets, the body stills. Somewhere in the prefrontal cortex, the circuits that help you feel what another person feels grow soft and dim. Not gone, just resting. They will be there in the morning. The anterior insula, that small region where self-awareness and empathy share the same neural tissue, settles into its nighttime mode. The constant splitting of attention between your own body and the world outside relaxes. For now, it's just you, your own heartbeat, your own breathing, your own warmth. The vagus nerve hums quietly along its wandering path, brainstem to heart to gut, maintaining the rhythm of rest. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the cortex, beneath the limbic system, beneath the brainstem circuits that have been running since before you were born, the oldest pattern continues. Reach out, check for safety, settle. It will be there when you wake. Sweet dreams, and we will see you next time on Bedtime Science.